Hi there, welcome to what's happening in Brazil. Let's start with the latest news from the country.
On May 29th, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva received the president Nicolás Maduro. The Venezuelan president came to Brazil to attend a meeting that gathered South American presidents on May 30th. On the occasion, President Lula said the relationship between Brazil and Venezuela is broad and hopes that the two countries never break ties again. After arriving in Brazil, Nicolás Maduro were welcomed by Lula at Planalto Palace, where they held a meeting behind closed doors. In the beginning of the current term, the Lula administration resumed diplomatic relations with Venezuela. They had been cut by the far-right Bolsonaro government. On Monday, May 29th, after a talk on bilateral agreements, the two presidents addressed speeches and joined a press conference. Maduro thanked for the welcome of the Brazilian government and condemned the sanctions imposed on Venezuela. The South America Summit, which took place on May 30th, gathered representatives from 12 countries in Brasília. The goal of the event is to strengthen the regional integration. Despite a lack of consensus, the Brazilian president suggested the resumption of the Union of South American Nations, also known as Unasur, but said he is open to other possibilities. Other relevant topics discussed were climate and commercial exchanges. Lula stated that the lack of collective action affects the capacity to curb the global temperature rise. About trade, Brazil's head of state suggested, among other measures, reducing the dependence on extra-regional currencies and the bureaucracy in good export and import procedures. Brazil's Landless Workers Movement, also known as MST, is under attack by conservatives in Congress and the media. The MST is the country's largest social movement and also the most important advocator for the agrarian reform. At the end of April, a Parliamentary Commission of Inquiry was approved in the Chamber of Deputies, dominated by right-wing parties. The commission is investigating the MST activities and purposes. April is a month marked by a traditional journey known as Landless Workers Struggle, when the movement occupies unproductive areas that aren't being used socially in many Brazilian regions. Most of the Commission's members come from right-wing parties. Among pro-government parliamentarians, the expectation is that the inquiry will become a circus, with inflamed speeches targeting social media audiences and the attempt to impose narratives against the movement. The Commission's activities started on May 23rd, and there are already accusations of preventing pro-agrarian reform parliamentarians from accessing information.
The pensions of generals and the payment of full pensions to their heirs cost 3 billion reais annually, which corresponds to about $600 million. Privileges that charge the public coffers and illustrate the range of influence of the armed forces in the Brazilian politics.
With personnel involved in the January 8th cope-mongering acts, the army is once again on the front pages, as well as the slice of the budget they cost to the Brazilian state each year. According to a survey by the Brazilian news website WOW, last year alone, over $600,000 were spent on pensions of retired army generals and full pensions paid to their heirs. It is almost the same figure spent on the salaries of all the 90,000 soldiers and active army corporals during that same period. This will last for longer, despite the 2001 decision about benefits cut in the future.
Então, esse teste de realidade está fazendo emergir situações como essa.
So, this reality test is making things like this emerge. Situations in which heirs of generals will receive pensions in 2093. This is something that no public servant in Brazil, in a OECD country, or BRICS has the right to.
Currently, for each active Army general, there are 24 retired officers and 48 heirs receiving full pensions. It is a privilege of this worker category that represents its institutional power and that hasn't been curbed by any civil government elected.
Ao longo de toda a República, os militares estiveram em posição de força.
Through Brazil's Republican history, the army has always had a strong position. Therefore, they could always define their position in default of the parliament and the executive power. I haven't seen in Brazil history a head of state that managed to command the armed forces with total control. They were all curbed.
Experts also point out to the fact that nominating representatives from the armed forces to governmental posts has lasting effects. Currently, there are 25 elected politicians from the armed forces in the Congress, 23 in the Chamber of Deputies, and 2 in the Senate. After the coup-mongering acts, Lula conducted changes of command in the armed forces, an attempt to reduce the range of influence of Bolsonarism. However, deeper changes collide with the lack of civilian staffers with the technical knowledge of military affairs. The tension between military personnel and the new government may also be related to the resumption of ideas less aligned with the United States.
Me parece que o principal ponto de tensão é
The main tension I see is that Brazil is prone to a non-aligned sovereignty foreign policy, while the armed forces are stuck in the concept of hegemonic power, dependent on weapons, equipment, and ideological principles. That's a point few have analyzed.
Despite being the country with the largest volume of fresh water in the world, the access to drinking water is a problem for a big part of the Brazilian population, particularly for those living in rural and peripheral territories. In order to revert this situation, a social organization launched the Water Fund project. Take a look at today's Cultural Talk.
Fresh water is abundant in Brazil, but the access to it isn't that easy. There are still many limitations imposed on thousands of people to access drinking water at home.
The major problem is water quality. Sometimes it's so dirty that can't be used to water the plants.
To overcome this situation, ActionAid Brazil launched the Water Fund, a project open to contributions from society. It proposes the implementation of social technologies in sanitation, reuse, access, and improvement of water quality.
O Fundo Água, né, ela é uma iniciativa da campanha de doações Água é Vida.
The Water Fund is an initiative by the donation campaign Water Means Life, launched in 2022 by ActionAid. It came out amidst a context in which Brazil is facing one of its most severe water crises in 90 years. So, our goal with the Water Fund is to contribute, even on a small scale. We understand the state has a fundamental role, but joint actions are also relevant.
The project is implementing 7 social technologies in the territories assisted, such as cisterns, biofilters, biodigester tanks, reuse of grey water, and water holes known in Brazil as cacimbas. With the biofilter technology, their routine changed.
In our house, we use it to receive mud. We use it to wash our clothes in another community due to the water, particularly light clothes. Now we can wash our clothes at home. We have more time for studying, getting information, participating in more meetings, and teaching women how to install filters. This is because we frequently depend on our husbands. Dig a hole over there for me. Go clean the filter. Once we know how to do it, that's a way to increase our autonomy. We do our stuff by ourselves.
Currently, the project is active in different states of the Northeast region, such as Maranhão, Bahia, and Piauí. Together with other partner organizations, it maps the areas and assists those in need.
As organizações, na verdade, parceiras da ActionAid, elas
The
selecionaram
partner
as famílias
organizations select the families that will be benefited. This selection had a solidarity bonding system project that is the backbone of ActionAid. Within the NGO, we call it apadrinhamento. However, it is mostly families that were subscribed in the solidarity bonding system, with children and youths being supported. That was one of our major focus, but wasn't the only one.
In 2022 alone, the project benefited over 500 families and 7 communities, such as Luiz. She is a farmer from Maranhão State and is benefiting from technology.
Estou acreditando bastante e espero que melhore.
I'm hopeful things will improve soon, so I will not be so worried about my kids getting sick. Water is life. If we don't have water, we don't have life. No human life, no animal life, no plants, no nothing. Without water, there is no life.
Did you like the show? So hit the like button and share with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to receive notifications. We'll see you next week.